And they misread that about Jones. Jones's audience rallied to him rather than abandon him, in large part because they were like, they won't even give him a trial. If he was so wrong, why won't they let us see the evidence?
Of course, and we saw during COVID and all the other nonsense and madness, it's always the same. There's a refusal to discuss the evidence, there's a refusal to debate or have a discussion. And the reason is, of course, because it's a scam.
Hey guys, I'm just back from Rebel Capitalist Live in Orlando, where I gave a talk from the stage, and I also got a bunch of interviews with really great speakers. One of them is Robert Barnes, you've just seen, a constitutional lawyer, and he defended a certain Alex Jones, and he tells the story, and also he has cases against the Fed and the FDA, so really fascinating discussion. You'll notice as well my new censorship apparatus, because basically I'm getting demonetized for everything now, even if I'm talking about things that are not even on the kind of guidelines list for YouTube itself. So very, very interesting how that's happening more and more. But in any case, enjoy this great conversation with Robert Barnes.
Here at Rebel Capitalist Live, and I've met up with constitutional lawyer Robert Barnes. Great to meet you, Robert.
Glad to be here.
And you know, we're doing these little short interviews, you know, some of the great speakers here. And I thought maybe first, if you gave a brief bio, just to familiarize the audience with who you are.
Sure. So I've been an American lawyer, been practicing licensed in Tennessee, Wisconsin, and California, and then federal courts across the country. Practiced domestically and globally for the better part of a quarter century, doing a wide range of cases, civil, criminal, and otherwise. Started out in tax and civil rights cases, and now that's expanded to any case that's kind of interesting, that challenges the law, that represents individual interest in liberty or freedom.
Excellent, yeah, and that's what this conference is all about, of course. Yeah, and we're going to go through a couple of key things, I think, in this. One of them I want to start off with is the kind of very interesting and very public story of Alex Jones, because I just found out you were involved in some of his defense, and I only recently discovered through the Twitter spaces with Carlson, I think it was, maybe it was Musk, I got the story of Alex Jones, and I had presumed he was mostly guilty, but it was fascinating to see it was pretty much a bona fide stitch-up. The whole thing with Sandy Lane, it was insane.
Indeed, the case itself was its own form of libel. So it was sort of a fake case, supposedly about a fake case. Jones himself comes from sort of the long American libertarian populist tradition. Was anti both parties when he started out in the early 1990s. The 9/11, before 9/11, he was considered the potential replacement or successor to Rush Limbaugh. 9/11 happens, and for about a year, he had been warning something like 9/11 was going to happen, because his belief was that powers that be wanted to have some national emergency to justify foreign wars and surveillance state domestically. Because he wouldn't shut up about that, his famous phrase was 9/11 was an inside job. He was fired from all of his radio stations. All of a sudden, the path he was on was gone. He just doubled down and stuck with it. Then, Obama comes along, and he becomes a little more overtly political in the sense that he sees Obama. He was anti-Bush, but he was also very anti-Obama, and he saw Obama as promoting the surveillance state in a way that others had not, and he was prescient in that regard. Obama ends up prosecuting more whistleblowers than all 43 presidents before him combined. Trump comes along, he's a big Trump fan, he supports Trump, he thinks Trump might shake up the system. Because of that, a guy who's never been sued in a quarter century suddenly is sued 25 times by 12 different people within 12 months. It was pure lawfare. And in that process, they used the most sensational case, the case of the kids who died at Sandy Hook. They used some of their 95% of the people who died at Sandy Hook refused to blame Alex Jones for any of it, refused to sue him, refused to join the suit, et cetera. But the 5% that did, many of whom are political, they brought the suits in two jurisdictions very hostile to Alex Jones, Austin, Texas, and the community in Connecticut where the deaths occurred. And it was clear when I got in, I was like, so Jones represented me briefly to give broad strategic advice, but primarily to defend on the constitutional issues. They were saying that you could punish someone for their speech even if you didn't even talk about a person. So like historically in America, there's a constitutional concept called colloquium, which says that in order for defamation to be an exception to the First Amendment, you have to say something specific, factually that's false, provably false, about a specific person. It can't be, I think Kentucky Fried Chicken is made of, dead people. Kentucky Fried Chicken can't sue me into oblivion because there's too many Kentucky Fried Chickens. So that's an example. It needs to be about a specific person or place. So I raised that issue. 2 Texas Supreme Court justices agreed, but we needed a third to take the case. The third wouldn't. It probably didn't help that all the Texas Supreme Court judges come from the Bush family political pedigree, and the primary critic on the right of the Bush family in Texas is Alex Jones. So they ultimately decided to deny him any trial on the merits. The trial was a pure show trial. It was a test run for what they were going to do to Trump. In the same way that all the mass social media censorship of Alex Jones was a test run to what they were going to do to Trump, any COVID critic, any election skeptic, so on and so forth. Jones was once again the canary in the coal mine. So both courts in Texas and Austin, almost parallel, suddenly decided to say, oh, we're not going to allow a trial on the merits. You are guilty. We're going to declare you guilty, and you can't tell the jury you're not guilty. We're going to go through a whole trial where literally in the Austin case, they had 6 movie cameras set up in the courtroom by a documentary film crew. Those even had a camera staring at the jury. The judge in the case later went to the red carpet introduction of the film. And as you have a case, it was like, I was criticized because I said, literally, they're making a film out of this case. And the judge's like, no. And then the judge goes to the red carpet invitation for it. She's like, hey, look at me, I'm a star now. It's like, this is insanity. This is a mockery of American law. And ultimately they got originally they asked for, I think, something like a $1 trillion verdict. How reasonable. Let's have a verdict bigger than most countries' GDP. And the judge was like, well, that's excessive. Let's just make it a few billion instead. It was insane. It was laughable. But because they know, he's Alex Jones, he's outside of the mainstream media, he's outside of mainstream political protection, the demonization will work. There's even HBO has a film that the reason what it is they wanted to make sure they could do a film that libeled Jones, that they're immune from suit because all they did was film a courtroom proceeding, which in America you're immune from libel if it's said in a courtroom proceeding. But that's why they couldn't allow a trial on the merits. A trial on the merits, they have to present that then in the film. They don't want to present that in the film. They only want to present the made-up version that, a jury assessed the facts and decided he was guilty. No, the jury was denied even hearing evidence that he was innocent. That was the beginning of what we would later see with the Trump cases.
Yeah, no, it's just astonishing, that whole story. And like what you said, is clearly not within American law, and yet no one could stop it because the American legal people had decided, yeah, we're going to break the law.
Exactly.
Go ahead and stop us.
They think it's almost like when they originally did the show trials, whether it's in the Soviet Union, whether it was post-Fidel Castro, whether it was any other totalitarian government. What the elites don't realize is that people only have confidence in trials because of the process that the trials employ. So if they see impartial juries, if they see impartial prosecutors, if they see impartial judges, then they can have confidence in the outcome. But they don't have confidence solely because you've got a black robe on. They don't suddenly have confidence because, it was a jury that decided the case. If the judge looks like the judge out of Idiocracy, and the jury looks like a bunch of Klan lynching types, and the prosecutor is conflicted himself in the case, you're going to get no confidence from the court of public opinion in these cases. And they misread that about Jones. Jones's audience rallied to him rather than abandon him, in large part because they were like, they won't even give him a trial. If he was so wrong, why won't they let us see the evidence?
Of course, and we saw during COVID and all the other nonsense and madness, it's always the same. There's a refusal to discuss the evidence, there's a refusal to debate or have a discussion. And the reason is, of course, because it's a scam. But Alex, in the end, his base did, of course, support him, etc. But one of our challenges and headwinds is that the cattle or the mass herd of humans, they're locked into the umbilical cord of mainstream media, legacy media. So they never get to even in the slightest hear what you just said. They're completely shielded. So I guess that's our challenge going forward.
Oh, it still is. I mean, it's much like the during the pandemic, where they're like, trust this person because it was all appeals to authority. It's like the literal Milgram experiment. Well, I told people we're in a living Milgram experiment during COVID. You have these people that come in with a white lab coat and tell people, do something horrible to this stranger over here. And half of America said, okay, when they did the Milgram experiment, and then they did the same with COVID. You can't be with your loved one on their deathbed. You can't have a wedding for your loved one. You can't send your kid to school. You're under house arrest and you can't even leave. You want to go to church, but that church is where the virus lives. You want to support the local business, but the local business is where the virus lives. Buy on Amazon. Take a government stimulation check. Invest in the stock market. Do the things that we direct you to do. And if you were somebody that was like, hey, some of this makes no sense, like as you did, it's like, hold on a second. This is counter evidence. This is counter the actual science. This is counter history. This is counter precedent. Then all of a sudden you're a dangerous threat, a source of misinformation, and had to be repelled and had to be excluded. And like the Jones verdicts, the Trump verdicts, all these cases are of the same type as all the COVID. Appeal to authority. Somebody in a black robe said it. Somebody in a white lab coat said it. Anthony Fauci, a well-respected public health official, so declared it. The same guy that engaged effectively in mass murder during the AIDS epidemic, who said you could get AIDS from somebody in the kitchen originally. That's who we're trusting. And what it really did is, even though it was a black pill for a lot of people to see the whole world go along with this, it was a red pill for the Robert Kennedys of the world and a lot of other people who woke up to, hold on a second, something's really gone AWOL here. And that ended up being that red pilling of 25% of the country is a white pill for everyone else. I started a group co-started called 1776 Law Center to deal with what I call the four freedoms: food freedom, financial freedom, political freedom, and medical freedom, all under attack at the same time during COVID. And so we sponsored a poll. One of the best pollsters in the world said, I want to find out how much of our American people are aware of these things. How much are they alert? How much are the normies starting to get red pilled? How much of them are following Neo out of the Matrix? And even the pollster was shocked at how much the number has moved post-COVID. So, for example, almost 80% of the country, including more than 50%, strongly want a law that gives them the right to buy food directly from the farmer without any government intervention whatsoever. No regulation, restriction, permission required. The same numbers want drug companies held liable for vaccine injuries. The same numbers support a wide range of financial freedom, political freedom, things that, just before COVID, you had the country split on whether social media should censor misinformation or not. Now you're getting 2-to-1 numbers opposed to censorship because they know how that works. Before COVID, you had almost nobody even really. The Bitcoin aware community was 2% of the country, right? They were going to big conferences and everything, but they were not a zeitgeist. Now you have 30 to 35% of the country that says one of their top issues is access to financial freedom through Bitcoin and crypto. So you're seeing they basically, like George was, Austrian economics, libertarian politics, independent guy living in Colombia. And then all of a sudden, he can't leave his house. He can't leave the country. And everything that went with that. And that set him down an entire red pill experience to where, he does a lot of these Rebel Capitalists live. He's not going to make money or much money on these events. These events are, let's spread freedom. Like, I'm here because, I would lose money in terms of the time here. I'm here because I want more people to adapt freedom technologies in their lives. And sometimes that technology is as simple as live a little bit more like the Amish do in terms of medical freedom, food freedom, etc. Big tech, freedom from big tech.
Which is being attacked, of course. The Amish are, and I think you're defending the Amish in some perspective, are you? Or?
Yeah, well, I have a half dozen cases over the Amish.
Excellent.
And about a year ago, I was up in front of them. And I was representing an Amish farmer, Amos Miller, who was under attack by the state and federal government on a regular basis. A fifth-generation dairy farmer from Lancaster County, the heart of Amish country, the heart of dairy country. I mean, you can see it portrayed in movies like Witness. I mean, these are some of the sweetest, nicest people in the world. Yeah. And yet, all of a sudden, every government agency is trying to shut him down. Every government agency is trying to take away his farm. Every government agency is trying to foreclose on him. Every government agency is sending emails back and forth with images of him in handcuffs and in prison. And it's like, even though no customer of his has ever complained in 25 years about a single food product he has ever made or distributed. And it's like, why? And I was explaining to this big group of Amish, I was like, here, you're going to get more of this. Because if you're Bill Gates and you in the Bill Gateses of the world, and you believe in that dystopian control grid, the four sort of vectors for it is food control, financial control, medical control, political control, speech control. It's not a coincidence that Bill Gates has massive investments in all four vectors, both in the public sector and the private sector. Extraordinary that way. I was like, if you want everybody to be pushed into that control grid, how do you avoid the exit ramps? And who is the exit ramp? And who is the exit ramp to? Well, you have a control group that says, what would life be like if you were not in the Bill Gates dystopian control grid? If you were outside of big food, big freedom, big food, big pharma, big tech, big media, all of it. Well, the Amish are the living examples of that. They don't use technology. They mostly don't use any pharmaceuticals. They grow their own food and eat their own food. Their kids go to their own homeschooled systems. They stay within their own church. They're not part of popular local culture. Consequently, well, what's happening with them in the last 25 years? Well, while we've had an explosion of chronic disease in the United States and the West, during this big pharma, big food, big tech era, not only physical, but emotional. I mean, young women reporting rates of self-harm 5 to 6 times higher than any prior generation, reporting levels of anxiety and depression and pharmaceutical dependence that are 3 to 4 times higher any prior generation. Why is that happening? Psychologically. Why do we have all these diseases we didn't have before? Why do we have them at the scale that we have them before? Where are all these cancers coming from? Why is 1 out of every 2 kids now on the autism spectrum when I knew of no one growing up as a kid? Maybe it's connected to big food, big pharma, big tech. And maybe our culture is being devalued by big media, by big Hollywood, by the big educational institutions. And the one exception is the Amish, and while we're experiencing all these problems, the Amish are living happier, healthier, longer lives than they've ever lived before. So if you're the Bill Gates of the world, you have a problem. You have the living alternative of the Amish. Kind of like the way Sweden was, hey, what would the world look like if we didn't do crazy lockdown politics? In the end, Sweden ended up proving their country was better. There was a war on Sweden because the fear was, oh, what if other people emulate this? What if other people see this is more successful? A control group alternative. That's what the Amish are, control group alternative, and that's why the government is out to destroy them.
Absolutely, Robert. And destroying the control group is the first job of the charlatan. Like Gates, WEF, they always, and Sweden was the perfect example, of course, but Belarus as well. I mean, Belarus, the International Monetary Fund, right? What have they got to do with COVID and viruses? They offered a big bursary or a load of money to the president there, and the condition was simply he had to put in lockdowns and mask the people. And they're going to give him a load of money. So again, destroy the control group. It's pivotal. Well, I know our time is short, Robert, but I was just going to finish with your work suing, I believe, the FDA, which might relate to the Amish, I'm not sure, and also the Fed. So maybe a really brief summary of those cases and why.
So on the medical freedom side and on the financial freedom side, there's a range of law the legal cases at 1776 Law Center that I'm a part of.
And is that 1776lawcenter.com?
Yes, 1776lawcenter.com. So made it simple, made it easy. But the two of the cross sections on medical freedom, one is everything related to what the FDA did during COVID but also specifically what they did vis-a-vis the COVID vaccine. The bait and switch that they pulled where they said, oh, there's a legitimate licensed vaccine available when it really wasn't. What they were sending out was the emergency use authorized vaccine so that they could put people in sort of legal purgatory with no relief or remedy when they were harmed. So we had suits relating to that on behalf of Children's Health Defense with co-counsel with Robert Kennedy. And the other one we have before the Supreme Court of the United States right now is the FDA went out and said, this is a safe, effective for the prevention of COVID-19 for your youngest possible child as young as 6 months old. We sued saying that's a complete lie. You're lying, and you know you're lying, and you're not allowed to lie in the guise of marketing a drug, in the guise of approving the marketing of a drug. You guys are going out there using Sesame Street to tell people it's safe, using Elmo to say it's safe, and you know it's not. You know it's not, especially not for this group. For young children, it was never safe. For young children, it was never effective because they don't face any risk, any meaningful, significant risk from COVID. They face a real risk from this mRNA drug that has not been meaningfully tested in an effective way for young children. It wasn't even a vaccine. It didn't inoculate or prevent COVID-19. Didn't prevent infection, didn't prevent transmission, the classic definition of a vaccine. So it's like you're lying about everything. We sued them because they changed the definition of the word vaccine. It was like there's a great meme of George Orwell reading a book that says 2024. Being, oh my goodness, this is shocking. That's what we're living in. Literally changing the word. We're like, you didn't have legal authority to change overnight the definition of vaccine, particularly in a way that misleads the American people. The lower court said, well, you might be right, but you're not allowed to sue the government as it relates to this matter. And I was like, this makes no sense. So we took it up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They said the same thing. They're doing everything possible to prohibit and prevent people from getting legal relief or remedy in courts, using doctrines like standing and mootness and ripeness and latches and all these Pontius Pilate pretexts to not take responsibility or accountability, for the judicial branch to not live up to its constitutional oath. So we're taking it to the Supreme Court of the United States. So we'll see how that goes. On the other side, George Gammon came to me years ago during all the crazy COVID stuff, seeing the Fed create new thing after new thing after new thing. He's like, there's got to be a way to sue the Fed, isn't there? And I was like, there is actually. You can use the Freedom of Information Act to demand they tell the world what they're up to. And I was like, why don't we ask for everything over the last century? Why don't we ask for their internal documentations and files, which I know from another matter that they have, including their actual views about the legal scope, constitutional limits of the income tax, for example, all of their about their own authority and the limits on that authority. All of those things that are in their internal memorandum that have been hiding in their archives that are almost as interesting as the Vatican's archives. So we asked for everything, and they came back and told us, oh, we don't know even how to locate things. We're the Federal Reserve, but we don't even know how to locate our own files. We would love to help, but we don't even know how to research our own files. We don't have keyword term searches and on and on. So then we searched the way in which they organize and index their files. It's like, what are you using, some old Dewey Decimal System? We figured out, yes, of course, they do in fact have means to search. So then we went back with another FOIA request saying, now we want you to use these techniques that you have identified in your own manual to get these records, and they have been playing games and not answering. So that gives us the right to sue. So coming soon to the American courts will be George Gammon versus the Federal Reserve.
Oh, excellent. Well, no better man than yourself too, Robert. And I'm guessing, though, in fairness, George and yourself are well able for it, but you'll be getting other forms of heat when that occurs, but you're well able for it. So superb, and best of luck with it, Robert.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hope you're enjoying all the free and informative content I send out. And as always, thanks so much to my Patreon and PayPal supporters. All the work I do does require some level of support. So if anyone can jump on board my Patreon, I do monthly Zooms and I do vlogs as well, depending on the level. So really appreciate if you can support, technical analysis that's correct, proper journalism, not the junk we get from legacy media. And this is really important, I think, to get the message out so people understand what's actually going on in the world and how to counter the worst of it. So thanks so much, everyone.